Middle East peace talks remain stalled following the rejection of an Israeli settlement freeze deal, which would see the Palestinian government formally recognise the Jewish state.
Countless American presidents have of course tried and failed to achieve a resolution between the two parties. So will Barack Obama's efforts be any different? Professor Daniel Kurtzer is a former United States ambassador to Israel. He's visiting Australia as a guest of the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, and he joins us now. Daniel Kurtzer, good morning and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Virginia.
Before we get to actually what's going on right now, let's go back just a little bit in time. From what you understand and have always understood about the Democrats' approach to the Middle East, what Bill Clinton tried to achieve and what you knew about Barack Obama, did you believe that he might have stood, or his administration might have stood, a better chance of trying to achieve some outcome in the Middle East?
Well, Obama got off to a very quick start. On day one of his administration, appointed George Mitchell as his special envoy. And in the words that he's been using, he has expressed great understanding for the degree to which the resolution of this issue is in U.S. national security interests. So the expectations have been raised very high that the United States would commit the resources and the time and the energy to try to bring about a resolution of the conflict.
You mentioned resources, time and energy there. Is that mostly what's needed here? It would seem to me that intractable positions by the two major parties over there sort of might need to shift too.
Yeah, it's not a simple conflict to be resolved, but when the United States has shown this kind of determination in the past, in the 1970s with respect to Egypt and Israel, in the early 1990s before the Madrid Peace Conference, we have played, I think, an important role in helping the parties reach agreements. We can do so again today. It's not a guarantee of success, but without that kind of leadership on the part of the U.S., and of course without the leadership and determination of the parties themselves, this conflict will persist.
Just before we get to the particulars, I just want to pull you up on that observation you made there about Egypt and Israel. I mean, it would seem to many that it was actually Egypt and Israel themselves who managed to forge that what's been a long-lasting peace, a surprising peace there. But you would see that still as a good example of US influence and still the continued significance of US influence in achieving an outcome like that.
Oh, for sure. Every analysis of that peace process indicates that it would not have gotten started without Anwar Sadat of Egypt. It would not have continued without Menachem Begin of Israel. But it would not have been consummated without the extraordinary efforts of the United States to bridge differences and provide creative fixes to the problems that came up. I don't want to exaggerate the U.S. role. It involved, of course, heroic leadership on the part of Arabs and Israelis. But they found in the 1978 Camp David Summit and then the 1979 peace treaty negotiations that they needed the U.S. To be there at critical moments in order to resolve differences that they could not resolve themselves.
That is very true, but nonetheless I wonder if you can see that there does seem to have been a change in the perception of US power over the last, say, 5 to 10 to 13 years. And that change in perception about just what the US is capable of now maybe is playing a role in how difficult it is to try and achieve some sort of lasting outcome between the two major players in the Middle East. Do you concede that's a particular issue?
Oh, sure, Virginia. I think that's the case. Since the early 1990s, the U.S. has not been as effective as I think the parties would have wanted or even that the United States would have expected. I co-authored a book a couple of years ago that looked into this issue, and we found a number of reasons that the United States could have done what it did do better, more effectively. The hope now is that the U.S. will absorb some of those lessons and play the kind of supportive and encouraging role that it can. But you're exactly right that it does require the commitment of the parties themselves, and particularly it requires leadership on the part of both the Palestinians and Israelis. And those are question marks that have not yet been answered.
Do you see the correct kind of leadership being displayed at the moment?
Well, on the Palestinian side, Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has said that he wants to proceed, but he leads a divided polity, both geographically and politically. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he wants to proceed, but he runs a coalition which is quite problematic with respect to peace process issues. The question is, can both of them overcome these kind of structural weaknesses in their leadership and move ahead in a way that would bring them certainly in parallel courses, and then come together into an agreement.
When we're talking then about leadership, how do you regard that offer that was made from the Israeli side to reimpose that freeze on new settlement buildings as long as the Palestinian Authority respected and acknowledged the right of Israel to exist? Was that always going to be a problematic request?
Well, I mean, the good news is that there's an indication here of Netanyahu's interest in resuming negotiations. He would not have put forward any idea if he were not interested in talking. On the other hand, the idea doesn't make a lot of sense because it's an apples and oranges problem. Settlements are a behavioral issue that Israel is being asked to change. The question of recognition is a major ideological problem in this context. It raises issues with respect to both Arab citizens of Israel and the degree to which they can continue to affiliate with the state,
yes,
but also raises the question of Palestinian refugees who are seeking to return to homes left behind in Palestine. It's a problem that needs to be resolved, but I'm not sure it is a simple issue of trading this off for a settlements freeze.
But there would have to be some dealing with that particular issue, wouldn't there, of Arab citizens in Israel if there's to be some sort of official recognition of it. That problem surely is not intractable. That surely can be acknowledged and resolved in some way.
Well, it's a deep issue that needs to be resolved. Netanyahu has said often that he's looking not just for the formal level of diplomatic recognition, but he wants some recognition of the right of the Jewish people to this place of Israel, of Palestine. The Palestinians are saying they're prepared in the context of an agreement to do the diplomatic recognition that's asked of them, but they wonder why they're being asked to go the additional step of some kind of historical recognition of Jewish rights. This question of narratives and rights and so forth, identity, will be very problematic, but you're right by saying that the issue will have to be addressed at some point in these negotiations.
Am I misreading the situation, Daniel Kurtzer, to say that from my perspective, it really seems as if we're seeing a slightly different Benjamin Netanyahu this time around than, say, we might have seen a few years back?
It looks that way, although it's too early to reach a definitive conclusion. In the 1990s, Netanyahu appeared very uncertain about moving ahead when he was prime minister in those days. He laid down a proposition that he would respond in kind to any peace offer made by Palestinians, and of course that was a problem in the context of those negotiations. The words that he's using this time around, his apparent interest in resuming negotiations appear to be different, but I think it's too early to draw a definitive conclusion. I think the real test is going to be, if we can get back to the negotiating table, what kind of substance Israel is willing to put forward in response to the substance the Palestinians put forward. And
do you believe that realistic conversations, meaningful conversations around that negotiating table are not too far away?
Well, they can be as close as this coming week if we can figure out a way to get over this immediate issue of settlements freeze. Israel needs to find a way to slow down considerably the pace of building and settlement activity in the territories. I think Palestinians need to be realistic in that it's not going to go down to zero. And both sides need to keep their eye on what the prize is here. The prize is an agreement that ends this conflict and ends the claims that both sides have against each other. And that's not going to be resolved unless we can get over this immediate crisis of settlements.
Really good to talk to you this morning, Daniel Kurtzer. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Virginia.